4 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're now watching Q News. Welcome to our special coverage of the unfolding situation in Syria. The Syrian state television has announced that there was a fall of President Bashar al-Assad's regime. Stay with us as we explore the events shaping Syria's future and the international response to this pivotal moment. Has announced the fall of President Bashar al-Assad's regime, declaring what it called the victory of the Syrian revolution. This morning, the channel also broadcast a statement read by 9 individuals titled Statement Number 1. The statement confirmed the complete takeover of the Syrian capital Damascus and the release of all the detainees. It also called for the preservation of all Syrian state assets during this transitional phase. Syrian Prime Minister Mohammad Ghazi al-Jalali has stated that his government is ready to cooperate with any leadership chosen by the Syrian people. He confirmed his readiness to facilitate a smooth transition of authority while urging the preservation of state institutions. Al-Jalali reiterated that Syria belongs to all its citizens and pledged to transfer all government files to the new leadership selected by the people. The Syrian Foreign Ministry has affirmed its commitment to representing the Syrian people with integrity. In a statement, the ministry emphasized that the homeland remains paramount, describing today as the beginning of a new chapter in Syria's history. It called for unity among Syrians and the establishment of a nation government governed by justice and equality, ensuring that all citizens enjoy their full rights and responsibilities. Media reports have revealed a surge in the number of civilian citizens attempting to cross into Lebanon. This comes as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and allied factions have reportedly taken control of Damascus and other major cities. The situation has led to overcrowding at border crossings, with many seeking refuge. Meanwhile, the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has released a statement saying that Egypt is closely monitoring the situation in Syria and reaffirming its support for Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The statement calls on all Syrian factions to prioritize national interests, unify their goals, and initiate a comprehensive political process to achieve peace and restore Syria's regional standing. The ministry also emphasized Egypt's continued efforts in collaboration with regional and international partners to alleviate Syria's suffering, support reconstruction, and ensure the safe return of refugees, ultimately aiming for the stability the Syrian people deserve. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has claimed that Russia has lost interest in Syria due to its focus on Ukraine. He called for an immediate ceasefire and negotiations to save lives in the ongoing conflict in Syria. Iraq's Border Guard Command has assured that its border with Syria is fully secured and does not require any additional forces. In a statement, it pledged to safeguard the border with honor and professionalism. Meanwhile, the Al-Qayyim crossing remains closed with fortified security measures, including thermal cameras, in place to ensure stability. A senior Jordanian government official has expressed concern over the rapid developments in Syria, emphasizing the need to preserve the country's unity and stability. The official called for the restoration of effective state institutions to ensure regional security. Jordan reaffirmed its commitment to supporting peace initiatives and highlighted the importance of dialogue and regional cooperation in resolving ongoing crises. The Israeli occupation army has announced the launch of a new operation in what it calls a buffer zone near al-Qneys in Syria. Reports confirm Israeli airstrikes targeting Tel Ayyub in the southwestern countryside of Syria's middle Qneys region. UN Special Envoy Geir Pedersen has expressed the United Nations' readiness to support Syrians in building a stable future. He highlighted the need for transitional arrangements that ensure peace and reconstruction. Pedersen also called for prioritizing dialogue, unity, and adherence to international humanitarian law. And for further analysis on the current situation in Syria, we're now joined from California by Dr. Ashraf Singer, world politics analyst for United Media Services. Welcome to Q News, sir. Now, let's start by your point of view. How did the language used in the Syrian Prime Minister's speech reflect the country's political situation?
Yeah, sad. It's really mad to see that transition in Syria occurred by that way. Of course, the prime minister was trying to deliver a message for Syrian people to increase, that kind of level of trust that they can really manage, that transition. But in fact, the Syria that collapse of the Assad government was really a signal or a major turning point about the future of Syria. That path, uh, towards, stability will take some time. And we're gonna to see some challenges, including, the need uh, to build, or rebuild the government,
Mm-hmm.
the governance structure,
Mm-hmm.
addressing, what the major problem for the people needs and prevent, the further regional instability. Syria is not really a small country. Syria is really neighboring many countries, and its location it's very crucial to keep that stability in the Middle East, particularly that war between Israel and Lebanon, war between Israel and Gaza or Hamas. So that situation now at that time is it's not easy
Mm-hmm.
to see the Middle East in the right direction now.
Mm-hmm. So, what messages did the Syrian Prime Minister aim to convey to international audiences in his speech? What were the main highlights?
So the prime minister, in his message, of course, he admit, that the collapse of the current regime or Assad regime, he was trying, to invite, the international community to look carefully to Syria transitions. Of course, probably under his estimation, still need to get, I would say, clarification from neighboring Syria, like Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, the whole of the Arab community. Fortunately, Egypt, was clear about it. His message that sent, clearly to the people of Syria first,
Mm-hmm.
that Egypt is working hard with Syrian people to support their transitions, and Egypt actually learned from its history. This is really important, and this is really crucial for Syria now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that support by Egypt government and Egypt as a state is very important as a major country in the Arab world. Syria is very important for Egypt. It's very important for the Arab unity and Arab community. So, so gladly that is, I heard that message from Egypt government. That is, or Egypt as a state is giving that message clear to the international community that that Egypt gonna to give full support for Syria to come back again as a regional player in the Arab world and in the Arab.
Dr. Singer, as a media expert, what are the implications of Syrian state television declaring the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime?
Wow, it was really big surprise. Even here in United States, some people really called me. They were crying. They didn't really like to see that transitions occurred in Syria by that way, particularly from the terrorist group. For that name of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham as the leader of this group, Golani or Golani. That group by United States, listed that group as a terrorist group. So some people cannot really digest this. How come that guy, he just like last month was a head of a terrorist group, and now uh, you see him, leading that transition in Syria. This is not right, for Syria, for the future of Syria. If the terrorist group or the people, they were claiming they are representing, the moderate of Islam, or they were in that gonna to fight corruption in Syria, or they were fighting an Assad or Assad regime. It seems to me like in the future in Syria will be really crucial. It will be very crucial for Syria, particularly with these groups of terrorists gonna to fight each other to control Syria, the decision of Syria. And this is my concern actually for future of Syria. The ongoing, what we learned from history, these guys gonna to fight each other, and this is scary because I would like to just encourage and encourage the Syrian people to be very careful in that transitions and listen carefully. That messages came from these guys never ever gonna to present the future of Syria. So the Syrian people should fight back to get their uh, army and get their government and create their own government based on their will through election or changing, the politicians by the peaceful way, because keeping fighting or increasing that level of violence in Syria will not serve their interest, and Syria needs really to stop, that violation or that violation of its border, either from Israel or other countries. They need really to uh, divided Syria, and everyone, uh, he or she, in his or her decision, is trying, to capture part of the Syria territory, and this is not right for the integrity of the state of Syria, because we need Syria to be as one country, one people, one army, one government. This is the future should be seen soon in Syria, not really by the hand of the terrorists, who were who is, I'm sorry, responsible to take lead of changing, the regime. But it seems to be, I got surprised, frankly, the fall of Assad regime by that way, and the silence of many major
Which brings me
powers.
to a very important question, Dr. Singer. The response of the international community to the fall of Bashar al Assad's regime. How do you see it so
Uh,
far?
Yeah, this is a good point. We have to watch it carefully. I read many scholars wrote in New York Times and Washington Post, referring to the I would say the competition among the major powers like China, Russia, U.S., the U.S., and they were really competing each other, and they left that vacuum or that area in the world, Syria,
Hmm.
to see these guys, like the terrorist groups, coming. But fortunately, the Middle East, the Arab world, learning from Egypt legacy, getting back his state after the what they call it, the Arab Spring, and it wasn't ever Arab Spring. It was Fall Spring. It was uh, we, it's not spring.
Hmm.
But why my best understanding that Egypt, did represent a very good model for Syria, and they have to really the Syrian people they have to read the Egypt case very well. But by the end, we cannot really rely on the international community because the international community now very divided over Lebanon, over Gaza. So it's still we have to trust our people. We have to build our country, build our army, build our institutions. That we should do now, not even tomorrow. I think this is the lesson they should learn from Egypt case. So Egypt and the there is a very important point too. Egypt and the Arab world is still neighboring Syria. So never ever these guys gonna to leave Syria alone for the terrorist people over there, and they have to 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 listen carefully that all that terrorist group they're gonna to fight each other need to take Syria to the civil war, and unfortunately the country that really moved to that transitions, never ever came back uh, to be uh, another the old Syria.
Yes.
But
So what I understand from you, Dr. Singer, is that we shouldn't expect much from the international community since it's already divided in global issues, including Gaza, Lebanon, Ukraine,
sure,
China, Taiwan, and so on. So what
sure.
challenges would Syria face in rebuilding its state institutions after the regime's collapse, considering what you have just told us?
Yeah, I mean, the main challenge that is, Syria, in terms of the model of democracy, is not, we cannot really export that model from the United States or Europe to apply in Syria because each country has her model or it is model, in terms of democracy. So building an institution, this is a very important, but the Syrian people, they have to focus on building their military, the Syrian military. This is the most important because that institution gonna to lead the country and they gonna to open, the the transitions or open the path. I'm sorry to the transition to democracy. If we can really adapt that model of democracy by the Western, but I would say it's a Syrian democracy. It's a Syrian model. They know much better than us for their country, and this is what good about the Egypt foreign policy that we need to support Syrian people, but they have to take their own decision without any kind of forcing on their decision. But it seems to me like in terms of next administration, even Trump, he said, Syria is irrelevant. Syria is not friend, is not enemy. But uh, but but my question actually, Syria was falling kind of a trap between Russia and United States, at a Cold War. It was a big competition between Russia and United States, and we have to remind ourselves that was a war of attrition. Um, between Russia and United States. And
Yes.
Syria was like a buffer to it. And this is
Yes.
one of the problem. If you inviting, like a major power to lead your country rather than to let your country control its sovereignty and its power and everything's by the people hand and by the Syrian people. So
Yes.
it's a kind of learning,
But again,
but it
this is
takes some
closely
time.
related, Dr. Singer, to the humanitarian situation. in any country where there is conflict, the humanitarian situation worsens. And the humanitarian crisis in Syria has actually worsened due to the political and security challenges. What's your take on that?
You are correct about that point. After the collapse of Assad regime, the Syrian currency fall dramatically, and I read before that level of inflation in Syria was crazy in Syria. So we learned um, from that case before the fall of the Assad regime. Uh, Israel was attacking, Syria. Of course, that degree of stability wasn't really sure. The United States was attacking Syria territory, so that stability wasn't really clear. Why, why, why the U.S. was really attacking the Syria regime? But it was of attrition, as I mentioned. But I can tell you that is, people in Syria, they were suffering uh, from that humanitarian crisis in terms of level of transportations, or that kind of security to secure the transportations from place to place, and the displacement, people also. So it was a war in every corner in Syria, and this is why the central government was facing uh, many challenges in last 10 years. Syria never ever got a degree of stability in terms of responding to respond to the people needs, the public administration definition of the role of the government there. So Syria was fighting in different provinces, Aleppo, Homs, Hama. So there are, different provinces
But
in
this led
Syria.
to the current situation now, the latest
All,
updates. So, what are the possible scenarios for Syria's future following the collapse of the Syrian regime?
Till now, no one can really predict exactly what is next in Syria, because every country has its own case. But Syria, of course, different than other countries. They were facing the challenges, after Arab Spring. So basically, we are watching carefully for next step by the Syrian people. That transition by the period by the people of Syria. So, but of course, we understand there are different steps they have to move, or they have to cross, to get their own country back again in terms of security and stability. So first, they need really to adapt the peaceful transitions, try to stop all the terrorist group, control their own decision, particularly with their neighbors and with their own. We don't like to watch or see Syria fall of the civil war. This is one of the crucial uh, steps for Syria, because civil war is a crazy. We cannot really control country if their people decide to fight each other. No one can really help this country. They're gonna to kill each other. They're gonna to fight each other. So this is will be like uh, more crazy than Assad period. If we admit that during Assad period, or the Assad regime, uh, they were, the Syrians, they were fighting each other. Was bad. So my prediction that Syria gonna to move, to different steps to reach, that degree of stability. But Syrian people, they need to think carefully about their future, and they have to be very careful in terms of choosing their people who gonna to represent them, what type of institution they need. If they can really adapt the Western democracy, it's okay. They can adapt their own democracy, it's okay. But by the end, they need to be a one unity. They have to learn from Egypt model. Egypt succeeded to build its state, and Egypt, now you can see it. After Arab Spring, no one can really predict Egypt to be like that way now. President of Egypt and Denmark, Norway, Ireland, and Norway. So is in his trip, you can see this is a smart country, is a rising country. So this is the future of Syria. Need to think carefully about model of Egypt too. But Egypt, the other model or succeeded model after, the Arab Spring, that, the people of Egypt were fighting the terrorist guys, they didn't really, people of Egypt allow these guys control the Egypt. And this is the lesson that Syrians should really learn and adapt that model, because no one can really trust, terrorists to do, because by the end, they're gonna to lead the country to be like Afghanistan
Yes.
or any bad model in international
Yes.
community.
Well, that was Dr. Ashraf Singer, world politics analyst for United Media Services. Thank you very much, sir, for your insights. And we will continue, of course, bringing you the latest developments in Syria. But for now, this brings us to the end of our special coverage for now. Remember to stay updated by following Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News Egypt for the latest developments, and stay with us.
For over a decade, Syria endured unimaginable suffering under a brutal conflict. Today marks the turning point with the HTS entrance to Damascus. What does this mean for the nation's future? Today we explore the intricate challenges and opportunities of Syria's transition, asking, can unity and hope triumph over division and disperse? In a highly anticipated development, the Syrian government collapsed early today, marking a dramatic end to the Assad family's 50-year rule. In the early morning, Syrian state television aired the video statement by a group of men announcing the ouster of President Bashar al-Assad and the release of all detainees from prison. The man reading the statement called on all factions to preserve institutions of the Free Syrian State. Meanwhile, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham announced earlier today that it had taken the capital and that Syrian forces were withdrawing. While addressing a message of reassurance to the Syrian people, Prime Minister Mohammed Ghazi stated that the government was ready to extend its hand to the opposition and transfer its functions to a transitional government. Ghazi added that he would remain in the country and was ready to cooperate with any leadership chosen by the Syrians. He also called on the military forces in Damascus to stay away from public institutions, which he said would remain under his supervision until they are formally handed over. In an official statement released early today, the Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs declared that a new chapter is being written in Syria's history, marking the beginning of a new era and a national covenant that unites the Syrian people, bringing them together rather than dividing them. The statement added that this new era will pave the way for the creation of a unified nation where all citizens enjoy their full rights and responsibilities, free from single-party rule. Building on this, Syria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed that it would continue to serve its citizens abroad despite the latest developments. The ministry, along with its diplomatic missions abroad, stated on its website that it remains committed to serving and assisting all citizens. Meanwhile, several other ministries and public institutions called on employees to return to work, assuring Syrians that services would continue. Reacting to the recent developments, the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Pedersen, has acknowledged the significant challenges the country faces, emphasizing that this moment presents an opportunity for renewal and a path toward a united and peaceful Syria. Pedersen stressed that the international community must support the Syrian people in realizing their legitimate aspirations to restore a unified country. He also urged Syrians to prioritize dialogue, unity, and respect for international humanitarian law and human rights in their efforts to rebuild society and country. And to help us explore more the political turmoil in Syria, we're joined over the phone, and we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Osama Raslan, a political analyst, and Mohammed Abu Shama, journalist and political writer. A very warm welcome. Dr. Aslin, what is the impact of HTS entries to Damascus in Syria and the region and globally?
Thank you, first of all, for having me. Well, actually, we're talking about a historic event from day one. That started like 10 days ago. It's a historic event. It has been proceeding with an unprecedented pace. But historic here is not necessarily used in a purely positive sense to everyone involved. As you must know, and as everyone with the slightest interest in Syrian affairs knows, Syria has always been a diverse society in terms of almost everything, including basically ethnicity and faith. So, if we concede to this fact of long-established diversity, one may very well expect equally varied ways of receiving those news. So such takeover on the mass does not necessarily augur ill or augur well. It all depends on how it will unfold in the very near future. But I'd like also to highlight the fact that despite those differences in taking up such a news and digesting them, one feeling, I believe, remains common among everyone involved, regardless of any affiliative consideration, which is bracing for the future. Nobody knows what is going to happen in the very near future.
Dr. Aslan, what's your narrative on the situation, on the entire situation, sir?
Well, the developments, as we can see them, and if we adopt an analytical approach to media coverage throughout almost the whole world, you're going to find them using words such as lightning offensive, swift developments, and other synonyms referring to the same meaning, how rushed and unexpected those developments have been. Still, with an analytical hindsight, I would tell that these developments could not have happened without prior planning and careful calculations and even arrangements by and between the direct parties concerned. Of course, here I'm talking about international parties into whose or against whose interests what is going on in Syria has been taking place and culminating into the fall of the Assad regime. What lies ahead for post-Assad Syria remains the most pressing concern to everyone. Regretfully, it seems that this is not a decision in the hands of the Syrian people only.
Okay, Mr. Abu Shama, how did this historic event unfold and what lies ahead for Syria after Assad?
In the beginning, I'd like to have me and I salute you and your special guest and to you, the viewers. The event is successfully faced as we've all surprised us that affect the future of Syria and the upcoming days in light of the armed forces control on the Syrian landscape and the exit Bashar al-Assad in that day. As stated by the CNN, and there are talks that led to this collapse properly that prevented the fighting within Damascus and outside Damascus, and we hope the safety for the Syrian people as each topple for a system or regime naturally would lead to the chaos and the violence actions, and that would increase the pain of Syria.
Dr. Aslan, Dr. Aslan, how do you read the Syrian's Prime Minister's recent statements that he will cooperate with any leadership chosen by the Syrians?
Well, he almost has nothing else to do. He is obliged to do so. The man is out of options. And this takes us to the very next notion to be highlighted, which is the challenges lying ahead. Because, you know, the leading Syrian figures, the leading figures on the Syrian arena are, of course, so diverse in terms of their interests, their goals, and their international or regional supporters. And this brings ahead so many challenges. Again, Syria is a diverse society. How that diversity would work? Would it work well or work against the Syrians themselves? It's all about how they're going to agree on a certain future. We should not forget the fact that so many flags have been flown across Syria over the last 12 years. Another challenge would be what becomes of the large arsenal of the Syrian army. This question is particularly of concern of that arsenal, whether it belongs to the Air Force or the Naval Force or ground forces, which might have more than conventional weapons. What happens if all this falls into the wrong hands? One more challenge is the chances.
Sir, can you elaborate more the meaning of the wrong hands from your own perspective, sir?
Yes, because there are strong chances for the revival of terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and Daesh and others, of course. Let's not forget what Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or
Sir,
HTF,
in Syria or in other places in the region?
in Syria, basically in Syria, of course, because you do not have control. Syria is now, you cannot say that Syria is under control now. Let me give you a proof of this. What did Israel proceed with this very day? It advanced, militarily advanced in East Qunaytira. This is the first military action by Israeli forces in this area since 1974. So nobody feels assured about the situation in Syria, the current situation in Syria, or what becomes of Syria in the near future.
How does Israel feel, sir?
Again, please?
How does Israel feel about what's happening?
Well, I would say, well, according to a statement, an official statement by Yitzhak Katz, the Israeli Minister of
Defense Minister.
Yeah, and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, they said that they are so jubilant about what happened, the fall of the Assad regime. They say that they have managed to cut off the main military arms the Assad regime has been using over the last decade or more, basically talking about Iran and the Lebanese group Hezbollah, which is Iran-backed, as everyone knows. So they are jubilant, they are upbeat about what happened, they are so happy about it, but this raises other questions about the future of Syria, the future of occupied Syrian lands, which are occupied by Israel.
Sir, I'll leave it there and I'll go to Mr. Abu Shama based on Ghazi's statement. Sir, how could the Prime Minister, along with the other factions, ensure the functioning of institutions and public facilities and to promote security among citizens?
The situation naturally is tangled and complicated and hard to control it. The state of case that started in a way in the morning, this morning, after the spread of the news of Bashar al-Assad's leaving the country and the understanding with the Prime Minister to keep him and to try to maintain the Syrian assets, which is a good step, yet all the indicators related to HTC is not assuring us, and the internal situation in Syria is very much concerned, as these factions under the HTC are conflicted factions, and it is willing, following the step of toppling al-Assad, to go back and fight each other. also there's a great disagreements between them and the northern forces. All these matters might affect the stability of Syria that we do not wish, and we hope that the existing government to move from the legitimacy of arming to the constitutional legislation and to the transitional period of civil leadership.
Sir, you hope, but could you predict what's going to happen?
In fact, no one can predict what
Perfect,
would happen
yes.
during this session following the past 11 days. All the optimistic nor the pessimistic said the same several scenarios and all went down with successive events. No one can predict the future, and whoever think for Syria and made this scenario are people who have interest and planned this for a long time ago and succeeded what happened, and no one can know decisively that the decision in Syria is dominated by several countries. On top of them, the two main powers, the USA and Russia, are...
What do you think, sir, these main powers are going to do and react, and how are they going to be reacting now towards Syria and the Syrian people?
As indicated, your kind guest at the Israeli forces exceeded the limits of the truce since 1974, and between Israel and Syria, and they are about to break the ice in the Golan Heights. Israel naturally won't accept the presence of ideological or religious armed forces that are linked with al-Qaeda and ISIS. That would push Israel to exceed its limit and to take the privilege of the current situations as well as the Syrian abilities to impose a real status on Syria. That's a sense that showed since the upon the leave of the al-assad and tried to impose a new reality as we used to throughout the past years of the events overwhelmed in the Middle East. And the Syrian reality is tempting for Israel to take advantage, which is going to be very risky, as well as in the northern Syria that is have great much of concern. That is an area of
Okay, I'll be back again to you, sir. Dr. Aslan, who are the key figures leading Syria's transition, and what challenges do they face?
It's a compound question, actually, but the key figures to be seen leading Syria's transition are yet to be specifically known. For a start, the head of HTS has said that the incumbent Prime Minister of Syria, Mohammed Maghazi al-Jalali, would keep his post until further notice. We keep coordinating among Syrian state institutions. But I believe all names, parties, coalitions, and more generally all Syrian players and actors, as well as their supporters, will claim a stake in the future of Syria. It would be a matter of being a stakeholder or a stumbling block. This is yet to be seen.
A stumbling block, sir, you said.
Yes, yes. Each and every party to the Syrian crisis now, I would say it's a crisis, would serve either as a stakeholder, a pro-construction stakeholder, or a stumbling block. This is what I expect to have in the near future. When it comes to the challenges, again, I mentioned a couple of them minutes ago, but let me add the following. because we have international superpowers that have direct presence, ambitions, and geostrategic interests in Syria. How is this going to play out? This is another difficult question. One more challenge is the geographic unity between Syria and neighboring countries that are fearful
Yes, sir.
of.
Could you please, sorry to interrupt you, but could you elaborate more about what's going to happen about this specific topic you're discussing now?
Yes, yes. Neighboring countries have strong and very legitimate fears about a potential dominoes effect that would take the Syrian experience, at least even partially, into their own soil as neighboring countries. And when it comes to neighboring countries, let me tell you this. We can categorize neighboring countries into three groups. First, countries with deep concerns about potential fallout of the Syrian turmoil into their own soil. Here we're talking basically about Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. The second category would be Iran and Russia, both of which have direct military presence in Syria, which means that they need to negotiate the situation and even the future of their personnel and their wider interests in Syria, not only with Syrians, but mainly with other international players in Syria as well. The third category of countries, of neighboring countries, is Israel, which as usual has not spared any time and has already proceeded with a military operation like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago.
Sir, you
As for the
mentioned that Israel is very happy and they're jubilant about what took place. Do you think what took place is in favor of Israel or against Israel, sir?
You mean the whole situation in Syria now?
Yes, exactly, sir.
Well, any situation of non-statehood would be for the benefit of an established neighboring country, not to mention Israel, of course, in this situation, which is an occupation force in the first place. They have already taken the Golan Heights for the last decades. Now they are expanding their military presence, like I told you, in Quneitra. It's a military action that that is unprecedented. I mean, since 1947, because the Quneitra region serves or has been serving as a buffer zone between the two warring countries. You know, at least theoretically, Syria and Israel are still at war. I mean, judging by the fact that they have not proceeded with a peace process or concluded a peace treaty like the situation is between Israel and Egypt since the 1937 war.
Mr. Abu Shama, with diverse and fragmented opposition, how can Syria's factions achieve unity?
It seems it's very difficult for the factions as there was some sort of rivals between these groups and neither united. Maybe in the past period, we're talking about those factions of religious nature, yet the civilian are groups that are in some European countries might return back to Syria to practice their right to participate. And does HTC to achieve the national reconciliation that we wish to happen? But it is difficult given the geographical event that would be pressure the Syrian front, but would give the freedom of a choice for the Syrian people. Naturally, they would have an opinion in the future, and we hope to agree and reach a reconciliation for the interests of the Syrian state and its stability, as it is vital for the region. But with the state of liquidity, since al-Aqsa flood in 2023 and all what happened in the Middle East coming from Israel, and I don't think that in the favor of Israel, the stability of Syria, and that's what happened upon the first moment when advanced through the borders and taking the advantage
Because I'm running out of time,
the
sorry, I have to interrupt you and ask Dr. Raslan. How can the international community support displaced Syrians at this point and refugees in returning home?
Classes here, you have more than 1 million Syrian refugees that are now almost German citizens. I mean, in Germany. Others have already been flown to the United States or Canada or other countries. Some of them have established businesses in several countries, if not many countries worldwide. So I believe for the most part of those refugees, they wouldn't prefer to go back to their country unless there is something really attractive there, which is not the case right now. But when it comes to refugees that are really forming a strong and heavy pressures on neighboring countries, especially in Egypt and in Jordan, and of course in Lebanon and Iraq, there should be international cooperation to alleviate the suffering of those people and alleviate the pressures on those neighboring countries' governments and help find a safe recourse for those refugees into their country, Syria.
That was Dr. Osama Raslan, political analyst, and Mohammed Abu Shama, journalist and political writer. Thank you very much for your insights, and dear viewers, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on the situation in Syria, minute-by-minute coverage on Q News. Don't stay tuned.